My mistake was thinking I could make just a cute little listicle video. So that's on me. Hello and welcome to Flyover Culture, your guided tour to pop culture in the Midwest. I'm Peyton Whaley. 2024 was the year of... In pop music, 2024 was the year of Chappell Roan. The Missouri-born diva rode the wave of her 2023 album, The Rise and Fall of a Midwest Princess, to unreal heights, bolstered by festival appearances, social media dominance, and the time-honored tradition called being a hot lady with a big sword. Which naturally got me thinking, what other Midwest pop princesses are waiting in the wings of the Pink Pony Club? Some artists that, if you like Chappell, probably hit those same highs. We're bound to find some artists like that, right? Right? To the more internet-rotted minds, Chappell Roan is either your dream girl's dream girl or a political saboteur who should be nicer to paparazzi. To the more casual fans, Chappell was born Kaylee Rose Amstutz to a conservative Christian family in Willard, Missouri, just outside of Springfield. As a teenager, she would upload song covers to YouTube, grabbing a bit of attention, and she later attended summer camp at Interlochen up in Michigan, plus some sojourns to New York where she caught the attention of Atlantic Records. She was signed at 17 years old. In 2017, Chappell put out her first single and EP, which are different, not at all what you're expecting if you found her through Hot to Go.
What are you saying?
She spent some time opening for other bands' tours before collaborating with pop producer Dan Nigro in 2018. The pair released Pink Pony Club in the spring of 2020, which, tough break for a song about finding community in a public space at a time when we were all stuck doing the exact opposite. And despite that song's critical acclaim and a few more singles, Atlantic wasn't feeling it, so the label dropped her later that year. So she moved back home to recalibrate for a bit, worked at a Scooter's Coffee, which, can you imagine being handed the sugariest latte of your life by the woman who wrote Pink Pony Club? Wild times. In fall of 2020, she went back to LA and reunited with Nigro, who was producing with Olivia Rodrigo in the next studio over. Not that long after, Chappell was opening for Rodrigo, and in no time we get to 2023, where she's firing off single after single and ultimately Rise and Fall in September of 2023. The album received solid critical praise, showing up on a few best of lists for the year, even if it wasn't an immediate commercial success. But that would soon change. Then boom, 2024. More people are finding her album, going to her shows, and then Coachella sends her straight into the stratosphere. The artist who was singing cursive over moody tracks just a few years before is now turning Kentuckiana Pride into a fire code violation, with bright, fun, heartbreaking sapphic slumber party pop. There's our prototypical Midwest princess. A story, like she called it, of a rise, then a fall, then a meteoric ascension. And if you like Chappell, there have to be more artists out there just like her. That's what I started this video to find out, and that is exactly what I'm gonna fumble a little bit. See, I wanted to find some artists that were similar to Chappell. If you like her, you'll like X, Y, and Z. But that brings with it some questions. Like the biggest one, how do we even define pop music? I dragged a friend into this mess to help me out.
I'm Jackie Fortier, originally from Quebec, Canada, and I'm a PhD candidate in musicology at the University of Indiana. I focus on popular music, but specifically on the island of Martinique. I do a lot of research with musicians directly. I interview them, go to live concerts, really trying to get a sense of what the scene is, and then what elements inspire and influence music, and also how audiences take that music and how they react to it.
Jackie's work falls mostly into ethnomusicology, which I would say differs a bit from musicology, and more pedantic scholars would say, how dare you, the two couldn't be more different.
If you go back in history, I think the differences between musicology and ethnomusicology are much larger. So musicology would be your classical music studies, classical music history. Ethnomusicology was much more focused in anthropology, sociology, ethnography. So a lot of non-classical music and a lot of field work.
You know, you typically work in the Caribbean.
Yes.
But today we're going to talk about really the Caribbean of the Midwest, Springfield, Missouri.
Exactly, yes.
Ms. Chappell Roan, if you were to do the same process with Chappell that you would with any other artist that you do a musicological study on, what approaches could you possibly take?
Honestly, with recent pop musicians, you get so much information on the internet. A lot of scholars might frown on, Wikipedia and go into YouTube videos, because those might not be the best places to find information on Beethoven.
Right.
But like Chappell Roan, you'll have interviews. I would go look for interviews on YouTube, interviews in magazines, in journals. Listen to the album, listen to some of the music podcasts. What do people have to say about her right now? And then if I want to bring it back to the scholarly aspects, I would think more largely about where she connects in current pop music studies, gender in music, scholarship on queerness in music as well. But to be honest, I usually like to look at how is she interpreted in our society, and what time is she coming in? Like, when is she popular? So she's popular in a very specific time frame. She's referencing very specific things. So looking into what those things mean. So that's more of the cultural, human, sociological approach I would have with that, yeah.
The question of the hour, how do we even define pop music?
Yeah, you got me with the musicology, ethnomusicology. What is pop?
We're here for fun.
Oh, it's so much fun. What is pop now sounds totally different from pop 50 years ago, 40 years ago. Sometimes I find it useful to use pop as a super large term. So especially if you're in academia, you'll have your jazz studies, you'll have your classical music studies, and you even have some departments or schools that have pop. I would consider Chappell Roan to be pop. I would consider Metallica to be pop, if you compare them to jazz or classical music.
Yeah.
And I'd say it's really music that attracts a lot of attention, and that is enjoyed by a lot of people. But it can even be music that, someone like Chappell Roan could make something that sounds like Chappell Roan, but only have a few thousand followers. It would still be pop.
Yeah.
So I'm not really giving you a definition. But I think that's the point as well, is that it's a term that is useful to describe a lot of music, but also not super specific at times.
We get a slightly clearer picture from Roy Schucher's Popular Music Culture, The Key Concepts. Schucher writes that pop became used more generically in the 1950s as a term for, quote, commercial, chart-oriented music aimed at a teenage market, which, looking at things now, is a wild way to say gay men in their 30s. Pop is defined by, Schucher says, general accessibility, its commercial orientation, an emphasis on memorable hooks or choruses, and a lyrical preoccupation with romantic love as a theme. And more recently, producers are regarded with just as much creative force as the songwriters. As Stan Hawkins writes in Queerness and Pop Music, pop is a huge undertaking of not just the performers, but the producers, stylists, designers, and overall intertextuality, especially when video is still a huge part of the pop ethos. Listening is an important part of visualizing the pop music experience, where mannerisms, gestures, and peculiarities of the body denote pleasure, sometimes pain, with a wish to entertain.
Where she becomes more interesting is what she decides to do with her music and how she presents herself. So her lyrics are a place where I find a lot of interest. You don't often have top songs like top 100 Billboard, number 1, number 2, being about lesbian relationship. Mm-hmm. That doesn't really happen. And just the way she presents herself on stage, she talks about being inspired by Violet Chachki for her makeup. She loves Sasha Colby. She's so open about all these drag figures that you will know super closely if you're a fan of RuPaul's Drag Race or if you go out to the drag shows around the country. And so that to me is super interesting as well, because people like Lady Gaga, they've been showcasing these artists. So it's not unheard of,
right.
But she's doing it a little bit differently, and it's very camp as well, which is super fun.
Yeah. Even with all the new things Chappell is trying with her music and how she presents it, there's still a question of a broader culture and academics taking pop seriously.
It also feels sometimes that pop is used in a negative light in that sense. Like you said, seen as something that's disposable, catered to a teenage audience, which that has a lot of gendered expectations.
Yeah, usually it's teenage girls. And what do they even like?
What do they know about music? Pop sometimes I feel like is this catch-all term where you will put a lot of pop female singers in. And then it can kind of remove from the layers that these artists have in their music. Jazz, if you're thinking about jazz in the 20s and the 30s, that's pop. And that's something that a lot of music intellectuals would look down on. And today, you know, it's a classic. You think about the Beatles, that's super pop, that's girl pop. Yeah. That's, no offense to the boomers, but that's like teenage girls were going crazy over that.
Yeah, you're not hearing men in their 50s at, you know, the Met Stadium screaming their lungs out.
No. Yeah. And yet, you know, some of the biggest supporters of the Beatles are men in their 60s and 50s. Hi, Dad.
Hi, Dad.
But that's pop. But what are the Beatles today? They're an institution. You know, they're a classic. They're a staple. They have so much cultural relevance. Right. And I think that's also where pop finds a lot of how, like, pop is super meaningful. Give it like a couple decades and Chappell Roan might be like, there'll be dozens of books on her and how important she was or whatever. Maybe, we'll see.
Yeah.
But it just...
Unless this video ages horribly.
Exactly. People and music will change categories over time as well. So pop, really, you throw things in there, make it work with your definition. So really no big help here.
The main takeaway here is that the Beatles would be nothing without teenage girls. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, pop. It's exactly what we thought it was, but also not quite that at all. Great. That helps. Okay, maybe if we start tracing back Chappell's musical family tree, her influences, maybe we can get somewhere. Luckily, there is somebody with a desk about 5 feet away from mine who I think can help with that.
I am Lisa Robin Young. I am the host of Morning Edition here at WFIU and The Influencers, coming soon to a theater near you. And I'm also an author, a performing artist, and a business owner.
You have a new show. Can you tell us all about The Influencers?
I like to tell people that The Influencers is like a cross between finding your roots in American Top 40. It's like the storytelling of American Top 40. Like if Casey Kasem and Henry Louis Gates Jr. got together to collaborate on a show, I think this would be it. We're tracing the musical family trees of the pop artists of the last 50 or so years. So one of the first things that I'm looking for when I'm selecting the artists we're going to profile is what does their music catalog look like? So somebody who maybe only has one album out would be harder for me to do a show on just because there's not enough of a discography to me to go back in time and make some connections. That's not always the case because you sent me down a rabbit hole with Chappell Roan. What are the connections in their family trees, musical family trees, that take us, how far back in time can we go? What interesting stories can we find along the way? And a lot of times I have no idea what I'm gonna find when I get started.
Speaking of giving you homework and challenging artists with only one album to their name, we're here to talk Chappell Roan.
Yeah. One of the things that really struck me was how very operatic in style her current music is. Like she does recitative at the opening of a song, and it's like, oh, that very plaintive, spoken almost kind of style is very operatic in nature, and we can connect those dots in time. But I mean, it's also very clearly pop music. It's danceable, it's fun, and it's very divergent from the early music that she did as Kaylee Rose. She talked about how before she turned 20 and moved to LA, which is really where most of the school nights music came from, it was very dark and heavy, and she was like, I couldn't be myself, but I moved to LA and I could finally be myself. And it's like we went from these dark, gray, heavy tunes with her vocal range much lower to these very up and high and colorful and bright. And it was like, she is being herself out loud and on purpose now. And I think that's wonderful. I think that's when most pop artists really get to break out, is when they get to be themselves. We saw it with Katy Perry. We saw it with Shania Twain. It's like, I'm going to do the music that is my story. And that's when they really start to develop the fan base that follows them forever. Yeah. So many women in music, their journeys, especially in popular music, like they're pigeonholed into a style. They're told this is what they need to do, or they think that that's what they need to do in order to break through. It doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, you know what, screw it, I'm going to go this way. And then they do, and it's like, they blow up.
Now, if you were to do an episode on Chappell for The Influencers, where do you start?
The cool thing is that she's given us that in with her name, right? Like she specifically chose Chappell Roan as a tribute to her grandfather, right? So who was this guy? What was this song, Strawberry Roan? What was it about? Who wrote that? And then we just keep going down that rabbit hole.
Down in the horse corral, standing alone, is an old Cavallo, a strawberry roan.
what are the things that create the identity of the artist? And then where did that come from? One of the things that I thought was really interesting was while she sings about Midwest life, she actually comes from a background that had a little bit of money. I mean, she went to Interlochen. You don't just go to Interlochen.
Right.
I grew up in Michigan. Interlochen, number one, you have to have talent, but number two, you have to have money.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, you just can't go. And so to be someone going there for songwriting tells me she had that talent, but also that she was able to afford to leave her family and travel to Michigan from Missouri to go live at this arts camp in the wilderness on the lake, right? And just immerse herself in her art. And then for her to then move on to these other opportunities that then open the door to her moving to LA and really getting to be herself.
What are some sort of takeaways we can get from looking at her, albeit very short, discography?
We talked several days ago about just the evolution of pop music in general and the term pop music and what that means. And pop music lyrically has matured so much in the last 100 years. You know, there was a time when holding hands was scandalous in popular music. It was like, oh, we don't hold hands. Like, what? And now you throw people in the back of the trunk. I mean, it really has, it's really, like, we have matured in the popular music world. And because of that, we get to see deeper, more meaningful connections, even though they're parasocial, between an artist and their fans, right? We're telling deeper stories. We're telling more meaningful stories through the music that we're hearing. Producers, and I was having this conversation with my husband the other day, who's like really a music nerd, more so than me. We were talking about the rise of producers as artists, right? There was Phil Spector back in the 60s and maybe a handful of other people like Quincy Jones, but now you've got Nigro, you've got Jack Antonoff, you've got these people who are taking songwriting credit on these records because they are shaping not just the way the sound is being made, but what the sound actually ends up being because they're pulling in their influences.
There's some other big influences we can nail down because, well, Chappell told us. Kate Bush, Alanis Morissette, Magnetic Fields, drag queens like Sasha Colby and Violet Chachki. So this last bit, what makes a Midwest pop princess? Like everything today, it's messy.
When you talk about Midwest pop, well, folk pop would be Tracy Chapman, and, you know, English-inspired pop would be Chrissie Hynde, right? Like, she went to England, formed a band, and then came back, right? So, but she grew up in the Midwest. Madonna grew up in the Midwest. Lizzo spent a good portion of her young days in the Midwest, moved away, came back, right? So, and I'm not trying to give you, like, the hit parade of 80,000 pop princesses here, but when you're looking at them, the thing to me that stands out is, again, that I'm going to be who I am despite where I come from, right? Madonna singing about, I'm going to keep the baby, you know, in an era where that was still very scandalous in the 80s. What do you mean, right? For Chappell Roan to say, I'm going to go up on this stage and I'm going to dance. And I'm just having fun and I'm going to live my life and do it the way I want to. I think we see a lot of that in Midwestern pop music, regardless of the era of pop music. We see a lot of, I'm standing on my own 2 feet. Mom and Dad, I love you, but I'm gonna move on from this hard scrabble life of whatever I've been in, even if I came from privilege, right? But that story of the hardworking Midwest work ethic, and that stood me in good stead, and now I'm gonna move on to being myself out loud and on purpose, is really, I think, a hallmark of a lot of the contemporary pop music that you can see probably from the 1970s forward from women of the Midwestern region.
And it's a specific Midwest.
Yes.
Because you've got amazing cultural centers in the Midwest. Chicago, St. Louis.
St. Louis. Wow.
St. Louis.
The French jumped out.
Chicago, St. Louis. You've got places in Ohio like Cleveland. You've got so many wonderful artists from the Midwest. But you're right, that is this kind of like rural, small town, white Midwest that is being portrayed and kind of like valorized. But it's not just like, again, any small town white Midwestern girl. She's queer. she's open about it, but she's also relating to her culture there a lot too. So it really brings the spotlight there, and it's cool because you get to think about those places a little bit more.
Genre is a funny thing. Classifying something as pop or rock or alternative helps set up guardrails, but that's about it. It's what happens between those guardrails and when artists play in that space that gives us great music. Not the direct one-to-one link from one artist to another like I was foolishly hoping for.
What we're really talking about are these once-in-a-generation artists who happen to be from the Midwest, who happen to make their mark on these themes in the pop music genre. But really, there can be only one. Madonna. Other people have tried, but there can be only one, right? There can be only one Lizzo. There can be only one Chappell Roan. And it's because they are so good at taking ownership of who they are. Nobody else is gonna be like that. Like you can't, because you'll just be a second-rate version. And to quote one of my favorite Midwest pop stars, Judy Garland said, it's better to be a first-rate version of yourself than a second-rate version of someone else. And so that's the thing that ties them all together is, yes, this is where I'm from. Yes, this is what that represents. And here I am standing on my own 2 feet in my own unique way. And y'all can get on board or you can get off the bus, because I'm going to keep on trucking. She made a comment about how the industry will let you go really, really far if you don't take care of yourself. And how if you just let them run roughshod over your life, you could become a superstar. And she's had to be intentional about, I'm not your poster child. I don't owe you anything. In parasocial relationships, when I'm on, I'm working, and when I'm not, leave me alone, right? Like to have those boundaries come from the Midwest. Those healthy boundaries around do's and don'ts and rights and wrongs and yeses and nos come from that Midwest work ethic and life on the farm, or that hardscrabble life where you have to make the decision to go to bed early because you got to get up the next day and go to work, right? Versus that LA story of we party till 3 a.m. and then we party some more and we're rubbing elbows and schmoozing and we never have ourselves back, right? And I think to me, that brings us back to that being yourself out loud and on purpose also means allowing yourself to reclaim those roots and say, that's a part of me too.
To say I didn't find any artists who fit into the Midwest pop princess archetype isn't quite true. It's just that, do you really need me telling you to listen to Madonna or Tracy Chapman or Lizzo? Yeah, no. Instead, I wanted to share some artists who deviate a bit. Women from the Midwest who may not fit into pop the way we define it for Chappell, but who are killing it all the same. Here are a few that are new to me that I found while researching this video. Anna Birch out of Detroit, Michigan sings about themes of unrequited love over a great retro indie pop rock sound. Lydia Lovelace from Columbus, Ohio has a bit of pop to her sound, but is more in the blues country rock camp. East St. Louis native Leighton Green has a similar career trajectory to Ms. Roan. She was working at Walmart while posting song covers online, which later led to a record deal. And after taking a break from music in 2020, she's coming back to the R&B space. And if you like Chappell's more risque lyrics, enjoy. And rounding us out, Public Universal Friend, an Indianapolis rock band with a sort of Appalachian folk sound. And their frontwoman, Jody Galadriel Friend, describes herself as the, quote, queer goth Americana matriarch. So, you're in good hands. Great pop music is all over the Midwest. We just have to keep an ear out. And not for the next Chappell Roan, but for the first of somebody doing their entirely own thing. But if we take one lesson from Chappell, support your local public media station.
I love NPR, guys. I'm serious. I donate.
A big thanks to Jacqueline Fortier. I'll have links below of some of the musicians that she's working with in Martinique. And another big thanks to Lisa Robin Young. You can check out the influencers now and a bunch of bonus videos down below. Thanks for watching.